we learned how to create objects. Great, wonderful. We learned that they're all instances of some capital O object thing that just so happens to exist in JavaScript, and that they all inherit from Object.prototype. This is all great and wonderful, but the next step is, rather than just stating the obvious about what objects do and do not have, it would be great if we could actually create objects ourselves that inherit from other objects of our choosing. Kind of back to that thinking of the Koopa Troopas that we were dealing with before. Like, I would like to create this ideal Koopa Troopa and then instantiate more objects that inherit from a given Koopa Troopa. What we're going to do in this lesson today is we're going to go through and figure out, how do I make an object that inherits from another object? And we'll kind of like kick the tires on that a little bit, and we'll see that, oh, if I don't have a property, I will look at this other object to see if it has the property, so on and so forth, right? We saw that object literals were one of the easiest ways to create objects. You just type two curly braces and you have an object. It's not going to get any easier than that as it goes along. But creating an object that inherits from another object is actually not that hard either. And we'll take that for a spin and like get into some of the edge cases around there. So let's create an object. We'll call it parent, and this is the object that should be the prototype for the object that we want to create, that has an object that its prototype that is not object.prototype. So like some other object. We want to create an object whose prototype is this parent right here. As you can tell by the name of this test suite, the object, capital O object, has a method called create. And Object.create takes one argument, which very conveniently happens to be the object that you would like your brand new object to inherit from. So we can say const child is Object.create, and we'll say parent. So what we want to do now is write a test to assume that object get prototype of the child, and that should be the parent in this case. Child inherits from parent, which inherits from Object.prototype. If the property doesn't exist on child, we'll go ahead and we'll check parent. If it doesn't exist on parent either, then we'll go up and we'll check Object.prototype. I'll leave writing any tests like that as an exercise to the reader. If you're so interested in proving that, like, I've given you all the tools to figure it out, but I am not going to walk us down that path. What if we wanted to create an object that has no prototype, that doesn't even inherit from Object.prototype? Is that even a thing that we could do? Isn't that the plotline to the Star Wars prequels? Weren't they bad? Why would we do this? I digress. Yeah, we can do it. We can create an object that does not inherit from anything, not the parent object, and not even Object.prototype, because it's actually true that Object.prototype itself doesn't inherit from anything either. So could we create an object like Object.prototype that doesn't inherit from anything? Yeah, let's figure it out. So we're gonna create a new object and we'll call it orphan, right? That seems like a good name. And it's just Object.create, and you pass in null. So this will create an object that has null, like it does not have a prototype, it does not have a parent. So we can expect Object.get prototype of this orphan to be null. And we said that is true as well. So let's also verify what I just said about Object.prototype not having a prototype. It is the end of the prototype chain in and of itself. So we'll kind of just write effectively the same test here. So we'll expect Object.get prototype of Object.prototype to be null as well. So very much the same thing. And we can see that that is also true, that Object.create with null as an argument will create us an object not dissimilar from Object.prototype. So, like, why is this a thing? Why would you ever want to do this? It definitely falls under the category of one of those things that, like, maybe you will need once in your entire career. I can't even tell you what that situation will be. I'm mostly demonstrating it because, like, if at one point you ever need this, well, here it is. Just put it in the back of your mind. The way that I became aware of it was in the case that most ridiculous JavaScript factoids come up, which is in a technical interview situation. There was some case where you needed an object that didn't actually iterate over any of the properties in its prototype chain. And so that is where it first came up for me, was some ridiculous challenge that you had to work through. But here are my I had to come up with a list of reasons why, in some level of practicality, you would want to do this. And the first one is that Object.prototype, just being a normal JavaScript object, can be mutated by other third-party code or other people on your team, or you accidentally. Anything could add additional properties to Object.prototype, and you, for some reason, do not want your brand new special object to accidentally inherit any of those properties. That could be one reason. Someone could change the way that Object.hasOwnProperty works or something along those lines. I'm really stretching here. But JavaScript objects do double duty. We can use them for object-oriented programming, but most of the time when we're using a JavaScript object, we're using them as a hash map or an associative array. And maybe we don't want all of that kind of prototype chain or inheriting anything from Object.prototype. This gives you a way to make what is effectively a true hash map or associative array without the inheritance chain. That's the best I can do. So if anything that I just said is true, then it should be the case that our little orphan object over here does not have any access to string, has own property, is prototype of, or anything along those lines. So let's see if that is true. We should expect that orphan to string is undefined. So we're literally going to write that. Expect orphan to string to be undefined. And we see that test passed as well. And so this little orphan object over here does not inherit from anything that all objects have access to that we proved in the last tutorial. I'd try to demonstrate that using hasOwnProperty, but my orphan object doesn't have hasOwnProperty, so I would have to call it from Object.prototype, and we haven't gotten into all the peculiarities of this and call, so I'm not going to do that right now. Maybe I'll do that in a subsequent video when we've kind of covered a little bit more of those tools. But for now, we can trust that, orphan.hasOwnProperty will be undefined as well. You can do that. You can see it. You can take it for a spin. I'm not going to kind of go all the way on this because it involved touching on a few things that we haven't totally covered yet. We've checked that a given object will walk up the prototype chain and check out Object.prototype, but will a child be able to access a property on its parents using that prototypal inheritance chain? Let's find out together. So we can expect that if I ask the child what its last name is, it should have the same last name as the parent. And then we're going to write two expectations in this test. We're also going to check to see that it does not actually have that property itself. We should probably not be writing two expectations in a test, but I'm going to. We'll expect that child.lastName. We'll expect that it is, in this case, my last name, assuming that I can type, and then we will expect that child does not actually have that property in and of itself. Child has own property, last name to be falsy. All right, let's run both of those tests and see what we have. Cool. So we can see that, yeah, it has it can access a last name property that it's getting from its parent, but does not have that property itself. All right, so I added an additional test here, which is basically the same as the previous test, but I added one more layer of indirection. So in this case, we're going to have a child that inherits from a parent that inherits from the grandparent, and we're going to basically assume the same things in the previous test, where the child has a last name property, but it is walking up the prototype chain from child to parent to grandparent to access that property. So let's give it a shot. Hey, the test passed. Everything works as expected. That is good. All right, so what did we learn today? We learned that Object.create can be used to create objects that have some other object as their prototype. We learned that you can use Object.create with a null argument to create objects with literally nothing in there as their prototype and nothing in their inheritance chain. And that we can create our own prototype chains by hand if that's something that really interests us, by kind of chaining enough Object.creates along. The only problem we have right now is that this process is still super manual. Like, even me setting up that grandparent chain was like individual bespoke objects. What I would really like is some way to just spit out Koopa Troopas that inherit from this prototypal Koopa Troopa ideal, rather than having to kind of wire up each one by hand using Object.create.